So I guess you would like some news from Australia. We have had some breaking news, and maybe this is the levy breaking. And so Christine Assange was just tweeting this out a little while ago, and I saw it circulate in our chat window before I actually came in. But it relates to a gentleman called Tony Kevin. So Tony Kevin was a former Australian ambassador, and he has come out in support of Julian Assange. So this is big.
So this is a British, Australian ambassador who says there's no obligation under ANZUS of the Five Eyes until sharing obligations to prevent any Australian government from bringing Julian Assange home safely, now from the UK under our effective consular protection of our national. David Hicks suffered in Guantanamo because John Howard wanted him there. The Australian government could have brought him home anytime it wanted, as Lee Sales' excellent book made clear. Our governments need to grow some and defend rights to free publication of public interest material by an outstanding Australian journalist. If you support what Daniel Ellsberg did with the Pentagon Papers, if you support what Woodward and Bernstein did to expose Watergate, if you suppose what Edward Snowden did, if you support Guardian and New York Times publications of WikiLeaks material, which they did, then you have to support Australian consular protection of Assange from vindictive U.S. vengeance, which we know is in train. It is simply about press freedom. Why the silence, Australian media? Have you read Rudy Giuliani's good advice to Trump on this? Tony Kevin, Australian ambassadors. So we're going to comment on that and fill us in with some of the details that non-Australians are not aware of.
Well, I don't know Tony Kevin all that well, but I do know that in 2017 he published a book called Return to Russia. He'd been there a long time before, and he went back to Russia and found it to be quite a different place. What I also know about Tony Kevin is that he has been protesting quite a deal about Australia engaging in arms trade with Saudi Arabia. He is an anti-war guy, and anybody who is, I mean, that was the fundamental thing that brought me to WikiLeaks when Julian said, if we can have a more healthy and truthful media environment, we have a hope of a more peaceful environment. And he also said that most of the wars in the previous 50 years had been actually started on media lies, and that ordinary people don't want to go to war. They have to be fooled into war. So anybody who's, that was my thing. I kind of really latched onto the WikiLeaks anti-war agenda because, that seemed to be such an important part of it. There was also this, this thing about privacy for us as citizens and transparency for governments. And in fact, of course, it's flipped the other way around. And it would be great if we could establish a new Magna Carta for the web, as Tim Berners-Lee would call it, but standards of truthfulness, both in Parliament and the media. Harsher penalties for bullshitting. But, what we've seen is the 1948 Propaganda Act repealed as part of the NDAA. So, in fact, and that was, that's been happening 2012, 31st of December, while everyone was watching the fireworks, I suppose, 2012. That was kind of a big turning point. What everybody noticed was that America had suddenly codified their right to some kind of international jurisdiction where they could pick up anybody anywhere in the world, any citizen, if they were suspected of being involved, giving material aid, for example, to a terrorist organization. That scared us all. That was the one that really made the headlines because it spoke of this extraterritoriality that is still being used to chase Julian Assange, who was not an American citizen. This is doubly grave. It's not just the threat to the First Amendment, but it's threatening journalists all around the world. And we have laws, the kind of canary in the coal mine, if you like, is, the weakest part of Five Eyes Australia, bringing in the testing these grounds with the foreign interference laws. And so they, would you believe that in there we have that element from the 1917 Espionage Act where it is, punishable if you even handle or transmit state secrets, right? So this is something that a lot of journalists have been, Helen Razor, who's been on the Vigil, Bernard Keane, who hasn't been on yet, but they're writing they're both writing for a newspaper called Crikey. So these two in particular are ringing the alarm bells in Australia. We have to have, provide resistance to this here, because if it works in Australia, then it can be, safely implemented in the rest of the world. So what you've got happening, that takes us away from that ideal and utopian situation in the future, which we would all love to be able to rely on public information and know what our politicians are doing in our name and hold them to account.
I am stumbling underground.